What would you say are 5 mind-blowing things that are proven to extend lifespan?
Yes, let's do this. Yes. So one of the things that's really getting a big spotlight shown on it, thankfully, is the microbiome. All right, so now we've got a ton of data on this. One of the most recent studies on this was published in 2019, and it was published in the journal Gut Microbes. As you know, there's journals dedicated to just about anything you can imagine. But they were looking at the microbiome makeup of people who have achieved longevity, right? So they were looking at a big subset of individuals who are over 90 years old, and they found something really interesting. People who had achieved this longevity had far greater diversity in their microbiome, more than people who are in the control group who were decades younger. All right. So there's something about this. Now, this isn't causality, of course, but there's this really powerful connection with the diversity of our bacteria, our gut bacteria, and how long we live. Now, what the researchers, and they looked at other confounding factors, but they really drilled down and found that these individuals who had more diversity in their gut microbiome had far lower markers for inflammation. And that's another one of these big catchwords today. Thankfully, we're talking about inflammation being a culprit behind so many chronic conditions. And so we're seeing there's this powerful regulatory force within our gut that's helping to keep inflammation in check. And so what we want to strive for, if we're looking at longevity and having that as one of our tenets, our intentions, is making sure that we have a diverse microbiome, right? Diversity was the hallmark found in the study. Now, of course, we've identified, and you've talked with Dr. William Lee, who's a really good friend of mine as well, and we've identified some specific strains, but this is going to just depend on where you live and all these different things. All right. Akkermansia is one of them. But more so than specific strains, it's the diversity and having more of the, quote, friendly or gut buddies, that our other mutual friend, Dr. Gundry, calls them, other friendly flora. And so how do we ensure that we're making sure that we're getting enough microbiome diversity? That's the question.
That is the question.
And so I talked about this in the Eat Smarter Family Cookbook, but also in particular, Eat Smarter, which came out around 2020, shared a ton of studies on this. The number one way to increase your microbiome diversity is increasing the amount of diverse food inputs. It's pretty simple. All right. So in our culture today, we might go to the grocery store and it looks like all this stuff, but it's really the majority of the food there that's stacking up on the grocery store shelves is made from the same like 5 or 6 foods, like wheat, corn, soy, rice, various forms of sugar. And we are lacking so severely the diversity of inputs. Our ancestors would get somewhere in the ballpark of 3,000 different inputs from different foods over the course of, say a couple of years. Today, the average person is lucky to get it maybe like 50, right? And so our microbiome is starving to death, essentially. And if we're not feeding those microbes the foods that they're looking for, they can't thrive. They can't diversify and flourish. And so one of the clearest studies that we have has affirmed that, and it's not, this is a big takeaway for everybody. When you're eating a food, you're not just eating that food, you're eating that food's microbiome as well. We talked about this a little bit before, but I want to emphasize this. When you eat a blueberry, it isn't just this little, it's got antioxidants, it's kind of, it's got some vitamins and minerals. It has its own microbiome. It has its own bacteria profile that we're eating along with that berry. Same with an avocado. You're eating that avocado's microbiome. You're eating those peanuts microbiome. You're eating, the list goes on and on, the sweet potato microbiome. And so you're basically taking on that data and it's interacting with your data. This isn't like a one-to-one thing where we eat that blueberry's diversity, their microbiome, and suddenly, we're taking on that blueberry data. It's interacting with our microbiome. And so as you know, we have trillions of different bacteria that are in and on our bodies. But the gut microbiome is just one of these areas. And we'll talk more about this as we go on, because now we're looking at, our skin has a microbiome, our lungs have a microbiome. Now there's more and more data emerging about the microbiome with the brain as well. And so what we want to do is target diversity in our diets. Even if we're health-minded, we can get stuck in a rut. And I've been guilty of this, where, somebody's maybe they're trying to build some muscle. So they got like the chicken, rice, vegetable, chicken, sweet potato, vegetable, whatever. And they're just eating the same things over and over again.
It's the bodybuilder diet.
The bodybuilder diet. And it works to a degree, but the bodybuilding isn't necessarily associated with longevity because our conversation is about longevity. There is a big component of that, which we'll get to later on with bodybuilding, but we want to be mindful. Yes, you can be very simplistic in those inputs, but make sure you're getting in something somehow where you're getting a bunch of different things in once. That can be in a shake, like you've got your protein shake over there that you're drinking on. You can add another, 5, 6 things to that. And you've done this before, experimenting, blending a bunch of stuff up, but getting those different plant inputs in particular. And this has been controversial. We both have talked about this. We've got friends who are hardcore carnivore diet, hardcore vegan diet. And the reality is humans evolved eating as an omnivore and eating a diversity of these inputs. And so there are a lot more different plant inputs that we have access to. Even the average American, of course, isn't eating a diversity of different animals as well. Like my wife is from Kenya, so they eat goat, nyama choma. And for me, it's just, her aunt made it one time. I was just like, I can't do it. I was just pitching the baby goat yoga. I was just like, I couldn't get into it. You know what I mean? And so, but maybe striving to, again, like if you maybe try a different type of fish when you go out to a restaurant, like just taking those opportunities to get in more diversity in your diet, be consistent in it. We have some colleagues who are like urging people to get in 30 different plant inputs a day or different nutrition inputs. I think that's a bit much. I don't think we should try to strive that far. I think we should do something that's a little bit closer or easier on ramp for people, which is 10 to 20, right? Because the average person, again, is getting like 5 to 10, right? So just upping the diversity of those inputs is going to help to diversify your microbiome, which is going to correlate with a longer lifespan.
You're so right. I mean, today, the standard American diet, I feel like there's the illusion of variety, but really most of the foods that Americans today are consuming, I mean, they fall within the category of ultra-processed foods, which are just permutations of the same handful of crops that are monocrops today that are really high in their caloric density, typically pretty low in nutrient density, right? Like wheat, corn, rice, you mentioned some of these. And they don't often contain many of the phytochemicals that we're starting to understand now are powerfully associated with good health. So I think this is fantastic advice.
You just open the door to another part of that, which is protecting the microbes we have. If you're eating all of these highly refined, ultra-processed foods, they're coming along with the conglomeration of things that are toxic to our gut. Not to mention the pesticides, herbicides, rodenticides, all these things that are designed to kill small organisms can wreak havoc on our gut. And so, being mindful of that. And also you mentioned this illusion of diversity. If you go down a cereal aisle, there's so many options. There's so many kinds. All right. We didn't have much money, so we got the off-brand stuff, but it was so many. We didn't have Fruit Loops. We had like Fruit Rings. And there's like, instead of Captain Crunch, it was like King Vitamin or some shit. But it still looked like there's all these options. But it's really all made from the same stuff. And so just taking back control of our thinking and being more intentional, especially when we're going into the produce section. And here's another big tip for everybody. And this is something that I've been very adamant about recently, like the last couple of years. There's great websites as well. Maybe you could throw one in the show notes where you can look up seasonal produce in your area, right? You could just put the city that you're in and you could see what's growing in your environment. That's probably just based on evolution. Nature's providing inputs that can help you to adapt, right? We got this category of like adaptogens, but really all food in our environment is like it's in our environment and we are a part of our environment. And that's what we forget. And so looking up some seasonal produce, like more recently, so this was maybe like 2 months ago was the last time I looked, it was like persimmons, like stuff that I normally wouldn't get and don't necessarily like, but I just grabbed a couple persimmons. There's a certain type of grapefruit. It was like green. It was a massive type of grapefruit.
Is that a pomelo?
Yes.
Is that what that is?
Yes, it's a pomelo. Wow, yeah.
I just impressed myself being able to identify. I don't think I've ever had a pomelo, but I've seen it.
Yep.
I'm like, what the hell is that?
It was in season, so I just grabbed some pomelos and sliced it up, had it, just getting in these. And it's because of having that insight and the intention. And then it brings a level of fun. And also, at some point you're going to find stuff that you really resonate with too, that you might find your new favorite food. I think everybody listening or watching, you have yet to have your best meal. You've yet to have the greatest meal that brings the most pleasure and joy to your life. That's still to come, you know?
Still to come.
Yeah.
I love that. Gut bacterial diversity, super, super important. Lower levels of inflammation, you mentioned.
Yeah.
I mean, that's major.
Yeah.
A lot of people are struggling with inflammatory conditions today. And inflammation has been linked recently to, even the non-obvious conditions that nobody wants. Depression has been connected to inflammation. There's the inflammatory cytokine model of depression. So your food could actually be impairing your mood, which is a crazy concept. I love this.
And we know that depression, we have an epidemic, to say the least, of mental health conditions, but depression is now the number one disability in the United States, number one cause of disability. And it's, wreaking havoc on our society. And we know that it is counter to longevity as well. So we don't want to just live a long time and be unhappy. You know what I mean? We want to keep our faculties. We want to have great cognitive function, good mental health, feel good, be happy. And all these things feed to each other. And we'll talk more about this. But number one, again, is diversity of your microbiome. We know this. We've got tons of studies on this. I just mentioned just a couple at this point. But to move on to the next one, this really kind of piggybacks on that sentiment, which is, again, keeping in mind that we're part of nature as well. We need a lot of diversity with our microbiome, a diverse community. We need the same thing for us as well as human beings. So number two, for longevity, one of the biggest bodies of evidence that we have, we talked about this before, but I'm going to reiterate this point. Brigham Young University, meta-analysis, over 148 studies, 148 different studies. And they checked out all these different confounding factors. And they found that having healthy social bonds, the quality of our relationships, people who have healthy social bonds have a 50% reduction in all-cause mortality compared to other people, all right? 50% reduction in death, essentially from all causes. Now, again, they looked at beating obesity. They looked at exercise. They looked at all these other things that matter. But the quality of our relationships mattered more. It was the number one thing. But we don't talk about this. We're looking for the next biohack. We're trying to red light our nuts. You know what I mean? But instead of focusing on the thing that matters most, all right? If you're going to red light your nuts, do it with friends.
Do it with friends. You heard it here first.
So keeping this in mind, and also, one of the people who's been a big influence on me is Dr. Waldinger. He's the director out of the longest running longitudinal study at Harvard of human longevity, really. But it happened by accident how it all happened. But again, he's reiterating that point. And he didn't believe it. I have a strong skepticism bone, which I think is very healthy today more than ever. And so did he. So when he was getting past the baton in this longevity study, he was skeptical that relationships mattered so much. So he went and reviewed the data. He went and checked with other top institutions, and he found, I can't deny it, having warm, as he called it, warm social bonds or warm social relationships was the number one factor determining how long you're going to live. Now, with this being said, how many of us are actually educated on how to have healthy relationships?
Yeah, I didn't take that class in school.
And today more than ever, we are so disconnected in a way. We can just look on an app to find a significant other, or you know what I mean. It's just this was prior to me. I met my wife prior to this innovation. Not to negate the benefits there are tons of great relationships that work out with apps and things like that. But there is so much disconnection, and we're more isolated than we've ever been, right? We're spending more time. My point being, we're spending more time on our devices, and it's dividing us. And so we're not spending more time, which in the real world, you're getting feedback immediately, whether or not you're connecting with somebody. And we also, and this is just to get a little bit more into the metaphysics, quantum physics. I've been studying a lot of the weird stuff with quantum science. It's just so weird and amazing. But Heart Math Institute, they were looking at some of the energy fields that the human body emits. And so we've known about this stuff for a long, long time. And so like just a great example is like a heart monitor. You know, you can see the electrical output of the human heart. Like we are a electrical electrical biomagnetic entity, right? And so the research at HeartMath found that the human body, specifically from the human heart, it has an electromagnetic field that expands from your body. It can be as far as 8 feet from you. All right. And so it's this energy field. And so when you're close to other people, your energy field is interacting. We know that we're exchanging microbial data, right? We're exchanging data for our microbiome. We know that people who have pets or have different people that they're around have more diversity of their microbiome, and they tend to have a longer lifespan, right? I can go on and on. We're exchanging things that we can't even see when we're with other people. And so all that gets muted when you're on your phone, by yourself, in your room all the time, watching Netflix and all this stuff, there's some great stuff out there. Okay, let's just be honest. But we've got to be more proactive than ever before. AI is here. All right. My youngest son, he's 13. He was just, some commercial came on about AI, and he was like, Dad, people are acting like they didn't see the Matrix. And I was like, bro, you're 13. How did you know that? Like, that's amazing. And so it's here, but I think our greatest job or blessing potentially in this, because it's here, like we might as well just understand that. How do we evolve and adapt? Investing more in our relationships and being in the real world with other people. AI might, if you're using it effectively, free up your time, right? It could do the jobs of a lot of other people, giving you more time to invest in humanity and, you know, in the real world. So,
yeah, I mean, and not to discount what you're saying, but I am optimistic that AI is going to provide a solution for people for whom IRL social connection is difficult. You know, maybe disabled people, elderly people. Like AI just passed the Turing test, if I recall correctly from what I saw on X, which is amazing. Like sooner or later, we're going to have AI companions, and obviously we have no idea how that's going to unfold in terms of the human psyche. But I mean, you brought up Robert Waldinger. I had him on my show in the past, and I mean, he's likened loneliness to a toxin on par with consuming alcohol or smoking cigarettes. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm optimistic that AI will at least do something for the epidemic of loneliness. At least that's my hope. I could be naive. Yeah. AI could turn around and just like start executing us like TT style.
I mean, you know, it's one of those things, man.
That's why I'm always very polite with ChatGPT. I'm like, please and thank you. Yeah. Because you never know. Yo, the day it becomes sentient.
ChatGPT is listening right now and taking notes. Like, who got respect? Who's putting respect on my name? You
exactly.
know? So it's like, I think was it Billy Madison? Where like some guy at the end like assassinated somebody, and Billy Madison like, I'm glad I apologized to that guy, you know. But let's look at some of the factors underneath why this matters. So I mentioned how we're sharing microbial data, how we're interacting with each other, you know, the energy field, and that's getting a little bit outside of the parameters of conventional science, but also being around other people, especially people that you feel safe with, dramatically increases your production and mobilization of what we refer to as these kind of anti-aging, health affirmative hormones and neurotransmitters, things like oxytocin, for example, which is really getting a moment as well. But oxytocin, all we're doing with modern science is identifying stuff that our ancestors knew forever. Like being with somebody that you love, hugging feels good, all right? Oxytocin is getting this nickname of like the love hormone, the cuddle hormone. There's so many others. Many we've not even identified yet. You know, there's anandamide. There's, you know, prolactin has some roles in this. Like there's so many others. So to just make it like that is the love hormone, it's not like that. But what we do know is that it is one of the most remarkable hormones that is able to counteract the activity of cortisol. All right. So we know that most of us are just cortisol addicts today, just stress on tap. And cortisol is awesome. It has its role, but the amounts that we're producing because of our chronic low-grade stress all the time and the times that we're producing it is a problem as well. You know, circadian medicine, maybe you heard it here first. I've talked about it a little bit in my books, but that is from my perspective, it's what's to come. Is circadian medicine, circadian nutrition, all that stuff. It's already here, but that's going to be a big topic of conversation coming up. And so oxytocin, cortisol, we were talking about cortisol. Cortisol produced high levels at night, very disruptive to sleep quality. If you're watching Netflix, if you're watching Severance, right before bed, your cortisol is going to be a little elevated, all right? And you might have your blue light blocking glasses on. I helped to popularize that, okay? 12 years ago, Sleep Smarter came out, all right? So I get it, and it does help, but there's a stimulation when we're on our devices, right? And so oxytocin, spending some time, what if you unplug for a little bit, hang out with your family, hang out with your significant other, hang out with your puppy, whatever, just spend a little time, downregulate, all right? We mentioned a little bit of the microbiome exchange. That's also immune system data, right? So a big part of longevity is not dying. All right. A big part of longevity is not dying. What are the main things taking us out, right? Heart disease. We'll talk more about that in a little bit, but in particular, with the next one I'm going to share, but also all manner of immune system dysfunction, whether it's related to cancer, whether it's related to infectious diseases. We've got to make sure that our immune system is strong and resilient and intelligent, right? And so the ability to have immunomodulation is one of those things that is improved when you're around other people and having healthy social bonds.
And it goes back to the microbiome too, because you're sharing microbes, you're cohabitating with people who are out in the world doing things, bringing various benign microbes back into the house. I mean, it's one of the reasons why having a dog seems to be so consistently related with better immune function and longevity.
Yep.
Not so for cats. Not so much for cats, which is kind of a bummer for me. But
how many cats do you have?
I just got one.
Okay.
Just one. But she's an indoor cat. So it's not like she's like out in the world bringing strange bugs back into the house.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, the mechanism by which dogs are, because they're just out sniffing things and tracking stuff in. Super interesting stuff. Okay. So social connection.
Yeah.
So gut bacterial diversity, we've got social connection, which is super, super important. Yeah. What's number 3?
Number 3, we're just going to keep piggybacking. And this one with that social connection, number 3, with some sound data on longevity is sex. All right. So I'm going to share this study specifically. So this was...
You just made a lot of people either really happy or really depressed.
Well, we're going to dive in. We're going to dive in. No pun intended. This was a 16-year study. And this was published in the American Journal of Cardiology. All right. So again, this is a journal dedicated to the heart and cardiovascular system. The number one cause of death in the United States still is the champion is heart disease. And this was conducted with over 1,000 male participants. And we're going to talk about women as well, by the way. But this was over 1,000 male participants aged 40 to 70. And it found that men who had sex at least twice a week were almost 50% less likely to die from heart disease than men who had sex once a month or less. There's a connection there. That is such a huge, like 5% is remarkable, but 50% is mind-blowing. It should make us stop in our tracks, like what's going on here? Now, again, we can't talk about causation with this because it probably goes both ways, no pun intended. Is it going to keep happening? So looking at the ability to have sex and have a healthy sexual relationship means you have good circulation, right? You have good blood flow. And one of my really good friends is Dr. Daniel Amen. And him and I have had multiple conversations about this and understanding that circulation, that blood flow. So this could be a chicken or egg scenario, but they help each other. And with that being said, having that healthy social connection, it isn't a relationship, intimate connection in particular. It isn't just preventative of heart disease, but also it is remarkable because he's a brain expert. He has the largest database of SPECT imaging. So he's scanned everybody's brain from Muhammad Ali to Justin Bieber.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And his data was used for the big NFL study. The list goes on and on. He's a genius, absolute brilliant guy, but the sweetest guy as well. And his work was also mirrored by researchers at the University of Maryland who found that regular sexual activity was able to actually stimulate neurogenesis. All right. And when you hear that, there's another study coupled with that one that came out in 2010 that found, of course, it was the hippocampus, the memory center of the brain, glorified memory center of the brain. But this stimulates growth and development, new brain cells. There's something about sex that is just like it pushes that button that turns on, another pun, turns on that brain activity. And one of the things that he shared with me was that our largest sexual organ is the brain, contrary to, what the guy might say.
Yeah.
But, it's just keeping that in mind that, it's great and nourishing for your brain, for your cardiovascular system. And there's studies in particular on orgasm with women and studying brain activity and seeing how remarkable it is with creating positive changes in the female brain. So helping to reduce stress, obviously, but making the brain much more resilient, more healthy blood flow and circulation in parts of the brain associated with better cognitive function, disease prevention, the list goes on and on. So we know that sex and orgasm, but they don't necessarily go together or have to go together, but that intimacy in particular, again, seeking that out, being more intentional about that. We're in a society that tends to pull that away, right? So a big part, even without the sexual intercourse part, just the proximity, being close to the person that you care about or that cares about you. And for those who aren't currently, doesn't have direct access to smashing, all right, right now, it's totally okay. Of course, you could have your eyes on that, but just being around, do whatever you can do to be around people that care about you. There's so much benefit that comes from that. We're just talking about going, all the way. Like, what does the data say? Now, to get into some of the tactical things here, that study noted that twice a week created a 50% reduction in heart disease versus once a month. All right. Knowing this data is probably not a good idea. You maybe want to send your significant other this podcast, maybe. All right. But just being like, honey, this has only been once this week. I need,
We're
tap
coming
and
up
watch.
on Friday.
Yeah. So it's not like that. It's the other things that are involved in the process of sex and having a healthy sexual relationship that help to support our longevity and our health, which is intimacy, which is being intentional, which is being compassionate and understanding and listening, or whatever quality needs to emerge from you to have that sexual health that you want to have. It isn't just this tactical thing, like I need to bust a nut, okay? Because it's like this time of of the week, right?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. I mean, I think if you're able to, as a man, if you're able to, and also female, because women have erectile tissue analogous to the penis. If you're able to achieve and sustain a healthy erection, I mean that's a good sign for your cardiovascular health. That's one of the first things to go. Yeah. A lot of people with preclinical cardiovascular disease, I'm sure like they develop erectile dysfunction. So I think that's, even if you don't have a significant other, I mean, I would wager that, if you're masturbating, and you're able to achieve healthy erections that way, like that's a good sign. It's also good for the prostate health. I was reading something, recently. I didn't do too rigorous a dive, but it's good for men for prostate health to ejaculate more frequently. I also think that mouth genital contact particularly performed on women. A lot of women in the audience are probably gonna be really happy to hear this. It's my hypothesis that's very good for, at the very least, the male's microbiome, because there's some good lactobacilli down there. A healthy vaginal microbiome. You want to share that?
Yeah. We should put the title of this episode, Eat the Kitty. All right? Eat the Kitty. It's going to have multiple meanings, but this is one of those things where, again, we in our culture today, things are slightly different, but the culture that I grew up in, this was such a foreign concept, right? We're not taught about this stuff. We're just kind of thrust into, last one, that's my last pun. We are thrust into a sexual relationship without understanding the other person. We just had that awkward class in school, if you get that, right? Most of the time it's like middle school. And so little attention is paid to the female body, and really understanding, the role of the clitoris, and how pleasure it can be different. It's not just about this thing that you're thinking about as a guy for your own pleasure, but being more intentional on that and learning about it. Read a book, listen to some of these experts. When you mentioned the prostate health, I thought about my friend, Dr. Rena Malik, and she's an expert in sexual health for men and women. And, she talks about stimulation. Also, Dr. Jolene Brighton is another person, and sexual pleasure for women. And so just getting some education. And as Max just threw on here for the science bros, also, you're going to be helping your own microbiome. It's a win-win.
Yeah. Cunnilingus is the new kombucha. No, but actually, do you remember this? There was a viral headline a couple of years ago. A woman cultured the bacteria from her own vagina and used it to make yogurt.
Well, damn. I mean, you can make yogurt out of anything.
That was a thing.
Case in point.
Yeah. And we all know yogurt's
damn coconut yogurt.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Dairy free. You've got lots of options. Yeah. Lots of optionality there. What's next?
What's next? Next up, so we covered microbiome diversity. We covered the importance of healthy social bonds. We covered sex and the impact that can have on longevity. Tons of data, and more is emerging on that as well. Number 4, and this really ties into a lot of these other things and makes it possible to do these other things. Number 4 is building and maintaining your muscle mass. All right. I'm so grateful. So many of my friends and colleagues are just championing this message right now. I text with Dr. Gabrielle Lyons. She's one of the sweetest people, man. She's always checking in on me, making sure I'm good. She's amazing. But she's a muscle-centric physician. And it's really a revolution in understanding, because it was kind of relegated, the idea of building muscle, to the bodybuilding community or athletes. And the personification, like how we identified that domain, oftentimes was associated with a shorter lifespan, ironically, or, not as smart, not as good cognitive health, or whatever the case might be, a dumb jock, right? Kind of stereotype. And when in reality, muscle is very likely, of all of our different organs and organ systems, we could make a strong argument that it is the organ of longevity. Now, I'm going to give some reasons why. Now, this, of course, the brain is huge in this. Obviously, it's controlling all this stuff. The microbiome, huge. But our muscle tissue is one of the biggest factors for our survivability, right? So being resilient, again, a big part of longevity is not dying. A big part of longevity is not dying, making us more resilient against whether it's cancer. We know that cancer trials, diagnoses, going through cancer treatment, people who have more muscle mass survive. All right. And whether this is, let's check off some boxes here. So when it comes to muscle is our body's primary source for glucose disposal, right? So we know that abnormal glucose regulation, insulin resistance, all these things are epidemics, leading to higher rates of heart disease, dementia, cancer. The list goes on and on. We can make an argument that, the majority of the 10 leading causes of death are directly connected to insulin resistance and poor glucose management. Muscle is the number one reservoir for absorbing and clearing the blood of glucose. If you have muscle, your body just does it way better. All right. So it's like an insurance policy against prediabetes and insulin resistance, all manner of blood sugar abnormalities, right? So that's number 1. So again, helping you to not die. Number 2, muscle is, in a very interesting way, it's like a reservoir. It's like a container that holds on to and contains a lot of anti-aging compounds, hormones, that over time, and this is why, people who have a healthy amount of muscle, if they get injured, for example, even at older age, they tend to recover, right? They might break something, but they're not wheelchair bound for the rest of their lives. Muscle has like a reservoir that's able to pump these things into your system to help you to bounce back. All right. So it's very protective. It's like a reservoir for anti-aging hormones. And another aspect is the myokines. Right. So we know that the emerging science with these myokines that our muscles produce when we contract them, when we're using our muscles, they're producing these myokines that have powerful impacts on keeping your brain healthy and protective. They're neuroprotective. They're also very powerful at helping to regulate and support your immune system. Again, helping you to not die. All of this is going on with muscle. I can go on and on and on. But the most obvious one is just the pure functionality. Muscle, what is its purpose? Like just superficially is to help you to do stuff, to move around, to be able to do life stuff, right? So whether we're talking about being with your community, right? Being able to walk or to play a sport or whatever the case might be, muscle is what is enabling you to do that.
What about I have a very savvy audience, so I don't know how many listeners right now are thinking this, but just in the odd chance that there are some females listening that are like, well, I don't want to be too bulky. I don't want to pack on muscle like a bodybuilder, become G.I. Jane, Demi Moore, from G.I. Jane back in the day. How would you debunk that myth? Because it is a myth, right?
Yeah.
That weight training makes women appear bulkier.
My man, like, I've been talking about this for almost 20 years, for over 20 years, actually. And now I'm hearing a lot of things that I've shared, like being echoed by really influential people. And one of them that I said like 20 years ago was just again, very superficially, very obvious. Men, we do a lot of stuff to try to put muscle on. We do a lot. We're trying to get in all these macros. We're doing protein shakes. We're working our ass off to try to build muscle. It's hard. It's hard to do. All right. And we have the hormonal cascade, the testosterone advantage to be able to do it way better than women. It's so difficult for us to do it. And yet women are afraid like they're going to get bulky. Most men are struggling their ass off to try to get bulky. Yeah. All right. So you could just put that to bed. This is not one of those things that to put on a sizable, noticeable, intimidating, scary amount of muscle takes so much. It's like a full-time job. And then the will of, I almost said Will Smith, but I don't know if it's too soon, but like the will of, somebody who is very mentally like driven, right? And so please, just even from that alone, just look at like most guys are trying to get big and they can't. They're at the gym all the time. They're just not putting on muscle like that. Now there is, of course, strategy behind doing stuff and being able to, see some progress for women. And thankfully, this conversation has changed dramatically in the last few years. A lot of women are just like, no, I'm done. I'm done with that. Like that whole belief is it. What's coming up for me is like my wife being from Kenya and having a physical culture, right? And so being much more active and understanding that women throughout history have been very active in doing a lot of like heavy lifting, in particular lifting kids, helping with gathering and things like that. I almost said hunting. I just watched this movie Prey it's like a predator movie.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I've heard of it.
But she wants to be a hunter. That's the whole thing. But anyways, just being able to help out and to do a lot of things that require muscle, that require a very physical culture. We had a much more physically literate culture where muscle was required. But today, all of that has been muted. And so there's been also this paradigm of the kind of demure, like very petite and soft and like, just hidden, tucked away, very delicate woman. There is a place for that, obviously, absolutely. But also there is something your genes are expecting. Your genes expect you to be strong because it's about survivability, right? And your version of what muscle and what strength is going to look like is very different from a bulky guy, all right? For you to actually put on muscle that you feel like I'm like whatever, you're probably going to have to take some anabolic steroids and things like that. And, you just can't do that eating good food and lifting weights. It's just, you got to just put that whole idea to bed.
Yeah, almost every jacked person that you see, male or female, on social media, they're all augmented. I mean, the vast majority of them, even those that will claim that they're natty,
Yeah.
they're not.
Yeah.
And also for women, like lifting heavy things is the best way to fortify bone strength.
Yes, that part. And that signal, your bone also, again, stem cells, all these different data aspects of like immune system function, cognitive function. There are things that are great for protecting and regenerating your brain tissue that are embedded in your bones. And when you use your bones, when you put weight-bearing exercise onto your bones, it helps your brain. And this circles back to, and I remember it was a conversation I had with Andrew Huberman about that. And this comes back to how muscle and cognitive function actually go hand in hand as well. We know that cardiovascular exercise is great for the brain. We know that. Tons of studies on that. But there's less data now about lifting weights and cognitive function, but we do have some pretty remarkable sets of data on this. In particular, lifting legs, strong quad muscles, strong leg muscles, and having a better long-term memory and better problem-solving ability and less anxiety, more stress resilience when people have stronger legs and they're working their legs on a regular basis. So getting stronger legs, if you're going to work any muscles, don't skip leg day. All right. That paradigm is over as well.
I feel like a lot of fellas need to hear that.
Yeah.
You know, fellas, I tend to be, if I'm going to skip any day, it's going to be leg day.
Yeah.
And I feel like for women, it's probably the opposite.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah. There's a paradigm of, it's all about the booty right now, so leg day and, that whole thing. And then for guys, it's still just like trying to get the big arms and the chest and that kind of thing and the big V taper.
And I get it. Like, who doesn't like a nice butt?
Yeah.
You know,
I know. Like, this goes back to the one we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
So, just keeping all this in mind, this is for all of us. Our genes expect us to be strong. Our genes expect us to walk. Our genes expect us to lift heavy things. Our genes expect us to be able to move quickly. These are all external environmental inputs that are telling our genes that I'm fit to be alive. All right. And so giving your body these inputs on a regular basis are just going to, again, it's going to lean towards you living longer. It's very logical. We're just talking about basic logic. And then we get into the minutia. And so, so we talked about the myokines, we talked about anti-aging reservoir, we talked about glucose disposal, but the main obvious thing is just pure functionality, being able to move and do stuff in the world. Having more muscle is telling the environment, these environmental inputs, I'm qualified to live. I'm strong enough to hold my own in this world. And so my recommendation for everybody listening is to make this, especially when you hit 40. 40 and over, your number one priority should be building muscle. Number one priority. The cool thing is there's a lot of data, and this has been, but from really unhealthy populations, to be honest, but on just how much muscle you lose each decade as you get older, right? Sarcopenia kicking in eventually. Now we know that it doesn't have to happen. It doesn't have to happen. You can build and maintain your muscles at 80. You can still build muscle and you can still protect and maintain that muscle. Is it harder? Fuck yeah, it's harder. All right. So now is the time to bank the muscle. Bank it. You can kind of coast on that for decades if you just maintain the muscle mass that you build. But, there's issues with protein metabolism as you get older. It is a thing. And it's more difficult, just even the energy and all the different things. So is it possible later on? Absolutely. But we want to get a jump start on it right now, especially again, once you hit 40, it should be your number one fitness priority, build muscle. Amen. Everything else is cool. Build muscle first.
Amen. Yeah. I love how you described it as an insurance policy. I had an exercise scientist on the show recently, Bill Campbell, who, he cited some really interesting research showing that even people in their 80s, are still totally capable of building muscle. Yeah. It truly is never too late. Obviously, there's higher risk of injury. You want to make sure that you're doing it safely. If you've never worked out before, like my dad's never been in a gym in his life. You want to work with a professional so that you don't hurt yourself. But yeah, super good advice. And then nutritionally, before moving on, how do you support that? Because protein, you kind of touched on protein metabolism, but
Yeah.
I would assume that there are certain nutritional recommendations that can help support those efforts.
Absolutely. And some of this stuff, again, it's Captain Obvious, but because of the diet wars, we can create this kind of, we can have blinders on in our minds and miss this. And so when I started in this field, and I've been, it's 22 years now, been working in health and fitness, starting off in my university gym, working as a personal trainer, to opening my clinical practice, working as a nutritionist for years. When I had my nutritional science class in college, we were taught about the food pyramid, and we had this low fat paradigm. It was heavy, right? The teacher was talking about the studies on how fat, leads to cardiovascular disease and right? And the thing was, at the time, I wasn't as well-versed in reading the research myself. Neither was my professor. Because if they actually read something, it's more so like this is handed out, like this is the one sheet on what to talk about when it comes to this subject. So fat was shamed. Carbs more recently have been shamed, right? Low carb movement, low carb for life. And, all the while with these, and by the way, there's value in each of these. It just depends on you. That's really where I got when working with people, thankfully, and this was years ago, was doing what was best for the person and not based on what my beliefs were, right? And so some people had more fat in their diet. Some people had more carbs in their diet, right? But what was left out of the conversation, these diet wars, is protein. Protein was shamed big time because it's supposed to be like, this is the thing that shortens your lifespans. Too much protein. And some of the most well-conducted studies that have analyzed the data on protein intake, it's far from like actually looking at not some isolated part of an animal food or like a casein molecule, but like looking at protein intake. It's far from, this dogma that we've been taught. And so all that to be said, protein has been here as a pillar this whole time. It's the most valuable things that our ancestors were looking for, all right? Throughout this human experience, hundreds of thousands of years, protein. You can get your hands on an animal, you're going to be all right, all right? And there are, again, thousands. We're not diminishing the value of plants and plant inputs, because we get into a camp of that, where it's just like plants are trying to kill you. And then animals are like, what do you eat then, right? We are omnivores. We are very intelligent at being able to find, and our ancestors figured out which foods we could eat and eat healthfully and safely, because there's a limit to just about anything as well. Like too much protein is bad too. You can eat too many, like, some of these plants, there's a toxic tolerance, right? You can hit a threshold where it is hurting you, but getting a little bit of it can actually help your immune system and your gut diversity and give you all these other benefits. It's kind of like, we talked with Dr. Sharon Berquist about this as well.
Oh, yeah.
And those plant inputs actually being one of those keys to longevity. It's that, quote, healthy stressor. But for some of our colleagues, they're like, we don't want any of that stress because it's killing you, right? That spinach is definitely, it's murdering you, right? And the reality is a little bit different, a lot different actually. So, but again, we don't want to go full in. We're not trying to have a massive spinach smoothie every day necessarily either, right? And so getting specifically to building muscle. Muscle is made from amino acids. It's made from proteins. This is just like, if you don't provide your body with the raw materials to make it, if you don't eat protein, you don't grow. You don't build muscle, period. It is just that simple. Now, carbohydrates, of course, like our muscles can, we're talking about like glycogen stores really fill you out, right? So if I remember correctly, it's like one gram of carbohydrate could help you. Carbohydrate, listen to the name, hydrate, can hold on to 4 grams of water, right? So 1 gram of carbohydrate, 4 grams of water. Maybe I'm flipping it a little bit.
No, you're right. That's why when people initiate like low carb diets, they'll suddenly lose a lot of weight. But most of that weight in the initial phase of the diet is it's like water weight.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's cool. Like, it's cool that you can manipulate your body and do stuff like that. But holding on to hydration is another important tenet for survival, right? Your brain is also holding on to hydration as well, right? You don't want to dry it up. You could literally lose brain volume if you don't have the compounds that help your brain, and also like electrolytes, sodium, things like that. But carbohydrates play a role in helping you to maintain a healthy water weight. Now, of course, most people eat way too many, of course, and garbage carbohydrates. But sweet potatoes, rice, there's a ton of really viable, healthy carbohydrates humans have been eating a long time. So primarily, if we're talking about building muscle, you need carbs, all right? Again, keto, like, I know the guys. These are some of my good friends, all right? There's a place for that. But even with the keto paradigm, there's still room for carbohydrates. And so, it just depends on your goals, on how much carbohydrates you're bringing in. But there's so much value that can be found in carbohydrate-rich food.
Yeah.
So.
Amen. I think that especially for older adults, like optimizing for protein is super important. I don't think there's any downside. I mean, look, when we're talking about like you're slamming protein shakes and all you're doing is eating lean protein, that can get problematic. But I think if you're prioritizing protein in your diet, there's a lot more good to be gained from even slightly over consuming protein, which in and of itself is really difficult to do because it's so satiating, than under consuming it. Because you under consume protein, you're going to be hungrier for carbs and fat, right? It's like the protein leverage hypothesis.
Exactly. Yeah. And we talked about this on a previous episode, but a study was conducted at St. Louis University. I'm from St. Louis, so shout out to everybody in the Lou. But they took test subjects and, they put them on a weight loss protocol, right? So there was a calorie reduction, but they had their first meal of the day was the only difference between the two study groups. One group received a carbohydrate dominant food, which was a bagel for breakfast, but the other group received eggs, which is rich in protein and fat. Same amount of calories. After the conclusion of the study, and this was like an 8 or 12 week study. And I shared the details in Eat Smarter. And also we talked about this previously, but at the conclusion of the studies, I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was over 50% more weight loss in the group who had the protein breakfast, the high protein and fat breakfast. They lost significantly more belly fat. They lost more with their BMI. Everything was better. They outperformed. Same amount of calories, but having more protein and those healthy fats that come along with those eggs did something positive for their metabolism that helped them to shed the excess that they were carrying. All right. It's just how it is, and that's okay. No, but if you want to have the bagel, you can have the bagel. All right. But you probably want to put a couple of eggs with that too. You know what I mean? Make sure that you're getting your protein, and protein just makes everything work better. I'm not advocating for a high protein diet per se, but you need to make sure you're getting the right amount of protein for you, it's not always easy because it's so satiating too. Right? If you're trying to build muscle, that's what makes it so difficult, right? For a lot of guys in particular, is like you got to get in a lot of protein to build muscle, especially if you're trying to do it quickly. And so what is that recommended amount? Well, according to the most proficient people in this space, you mentioned Dr. Bill Campbell, he's a friend as well. It's somewhere around 0.8 grams to 1 gram of protein per ideal body weight, per ideal pounds of body weight. So if you're 135 pounds and you want to be 120, you're going to target somewhere around 100 to 120 grams of protein in a day, right? And so this is why a lot of our longevity expert friends are changing their tune on intermittent fasting a little bit, because so many people were not getting in the amount of protein. It was creating negative effects with their muscle mass, which again, this is being touted as the organ of longevity. And so being able to get enough protein, doesn't mean you can't intermittent fast, but you got to be more intentional, right? And so, yeah. So
that's like 3 meals a day. That's like 35 grams of protein per meal. Easy peasy.
Not that difficult, but just being intentional about it, right? Taking that opportunity when you're having that food to get that protein in.
Yeah. Amen. All right. So what is the last secret hidden way to achieve longevity? We've got one left, right?
Got one left, yeah. So, and I actually brought these with me to make sure that I just share this clearly because it's so remarkable. 2 studies. Number 1, this was published in the Journal of Chronic Diseases. And they were taking into consideration a variety of confounding factors, a variety of risk factors. And they found that the lack of satisfaction in the work that we do is a significant risk factor for coronary heart disease, the number one thing that's killing us. Coupled with that, a massive meta-analysis. This was published in Occupational and Environmental Medicine. This was almost 500 studies that were analyzed for this. All right, this is rare. And they found that job satisfaction is one of the strongest influences on our mental and physical health. All right, so number 5 here is doing meaningful work. And there's a couple of things here. And if you hate your job right now, I got good news for you. All right, we'll get to that. But there cannot be enough said about wanting to live because you have a reason to live, having a purpose. I remember one of my mentors, Bob Proctor, sharing with me that he couldn't even fathom the idea of retiring. You know, he loved what he did so much. He wanted to work to his last day, he was so full of vitality. He was so full of vitality. And he was just one of the sharpest, smartest people I've ever met. It's just like, it's incredible. And having that sense of purpose, having something to dedicate your life to, something that helps you to, quote, get up out of bed in the morning, whether that's your family, you know, like being there as a grandparent or great grandparent, because you want to see, you know, your grandkids thrive, or you want to be there at your grandkid's wedding. Whether that is, you know, the work that you're doing, maybe there's a philanthropic thing that you're invested in, you know, the community that you are involved in and you're trying to uplift and support, or of course, the tactical, quote, work that you do, right? And so for you, you know, I know this because we're very similar in this. It's like the work that we do matters and we feel it. And we know that it's making an impact, and we know that we have a gift in this to be able to share, and kind of it would be selfish to withhold it. And so it's like it motivates us to share what we know, to share our wisdom, and also to highlight the wisdom of other people, and to uplift and help to create a positive change in our lifetime here in an environment that is not doing well right now. You know, and so meaningful work is critical. Now, what if you don't have that meaningful work right now? This is not just relegated to the, quote, job that you have. Again, this could be having meaning in your family, right? Many people that are doing jobs that they don't necessarily enjoy are doing it because they want to take care of their family. Lean into that, love it, and bring more love to what you're doing because you love your family. It's just all going up here in your mind. It's how you are framing it, right? And now this is coming from a guy that did a lot of stuff, all right? So when I was in college, you know, my first job, of course, was the obligatory McDonald's fast food, right?
You worked at McDonald's?
Yes. 15 and a half, you know, I think it was like, I'm not kidding, $4 and something per hour, minimum wage. Like this was like, what, 1995 or something like that. But this was like back in the day, right?
So funny.
And so I'm back there, which was, it sucked, man. I did come up with my own burger. You know, I was like messed around with some stuff. But then from there, I worked at Target. I worked at being from St. Louis, I worked at the Kiel Center, which is where the hockey stadium was. And so, which was one of the funnest jobs ever. But I found meaning at Target, for example. And just like, I always had this personality, which I didn't realize until later in life, until I stopped having all these jobs. My personality was to be the boss, right? So I'm like 16 working at Target, but I found a way to like move up and to be able to pass out so we can get stuff done. I just wanted to get stuff done, right? So that we can get on to whatever else we wanted to do. And so, but working at the hockey stadium was dope. Wayne Gretzky was on the team for a brief moment in St. Louis on the Blues, which was electric, all right? But from there, I got jobs when I was in college working in casinos in St. Louis. They were like some of the, quote, good jobs. And it was hard, man. We're talking about manual labor, wearing a jumpsuit. I'm locked in a room. I was in the hard count department. So we had to count every coin in the casino every day, empty all the machines, count all the money, right? So it's a lot of heavy lifting, which I enjoyed. I ended up when I was 19, I became a supervisor, right? And so I got people who were like 40, 50, 60. Like there's this old guy named Marshall, for example. It's just like, I don't know how he was showing up, but he kept showing up. Like he chain smoked on his breaks. But like in his 60s, some of them were not happy about that, of course, like having this young kid being the boss. But like there's these personality traits that I found over time. And my mindset even then was, I'm doing this to get a job done. Like I found value in accomplishing this thing every day, right? We couldn't leave until the job was done, which was really good for my personality type. And so it made me more efficient. It made me more creative, right? So I found the value in a job that in many ways kind of sucks. Like I'm breathing in coin dust all day and like locked in this room. We couldn't get out unless security comes and wands us, right? And sometimes security is just being assholes and they take a long time or whatever, you know, and it's like this whole like, it's like a prisoner guard type of energy to it, you know, but I found value in it and kept persevering. So just reframing in your mind, whatever job you're doing, I've had the great gift of noticing people that really love doing what they're doing and they're doing the same job, or hate what they're doing the same job, right? So we had an air conditioning guy come recently. This guy, he was a magician. All right, young guy, he's probably he seemed like early 20s, but I'm going to say maybe late 20s. He was so thoughtful, so kind, the way he communicated, you know, just like he looked me in my eyes and like he was very present. He had to come back a few days later with a part. And even, you know, he came around, we'll say 8 a.m. and he was just like, you know, very kind of like knocking lightly, like, hey, is everybody up? You know, I don't want to wake anybody up if they're not, you know, he's like just thoughtful, right? I was like, man, that's amazing. And also if we've seen air conditioned folks who are just like, you know, just like drudging through the day, you know? And so it's just about the internal mechanism and finding a way to find joy and find love in the thing that you are doing. And it might be something outside of the job itself that it's for. So it might be about, again, taking care of your family, you know, finding some value in that. So doing meaningful work and or finding meaning in what you're doing. And last piece here is this very powerful sentiment that I live by, that I teach my sons all the time. How you do anything is how you do everything. How you do anything is how you do everything. If you're going to be excellent at basketball, you better be excellent at washing these fucking dishes. All right. You don't want to eat off of dishes that have like grime and all this stuff on it. Do you want that? Do you want your mom to eat off of that? Right? Do a good job. Show up and do the best job you can in the thing that you are faced with, because it's a habit. Excellence is a habit, right? Purpose, being strong, being insightful, all these things are habits, right? So building those muscles in everything that we do, right? I'm not coming here to, you know, to be less than. I'm not coming here to be a subpar version of myself. If I'm going to show up, I'm going to be the best I could possibly be and strive for even better. So
it's so good. Take pride in what you do, no matter what it is. I think it's so valuable. I'm a control freak. Everything that I put out, for as long as I can remember, I've always took immense pride in my work. You know, it's not to say that I'm perfect in all areas of my work, nor in life, but I think it's really important to take stock of what it is that you're doing and to put your whole self into it.
Yeah. The people that are listening and watching, just to reiterate this about you, Max is one of the most hands-on people with his education. He really cares about how things are getting communicated and shared. And so for some people would see it as a detriment, or it's like something that might slow you down, but you are very intentional about how you do things, you know? And so it's because you care. And that's like a superpower. That's how I see it. You know, at first when you told me, I was like, you're doing that too? Like somebody else could do that part, you know, even for me, because I'm very similar though. I'm very similar. I care. I don't want to just do any random thing, right? There's an intention behind it, and you want to connect and you want to help and you want to do what you can to make sure that what you're, quote, putting out there is making the maximum impact. And you take that very seriously. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, brother, for noticing. Yeah, man. Well, this was so fun. This was so great. What an empowering deep dive. And for those who are just listening, I mean, you've got your notes there. You bring the science, which I think is super cool. everything you put out too, brother. It's like so important. And I love the courage with which you imbue all your work. Yeah, it's just so great being getting to call myself among your colleagues. It's awesome.
Thank you, man. I received that. I appreciate that, bro. Hey, if you like this video, make sure to check out this video right here. The researchers found that people who had healthy social bonds had a 50% boost in longevity versus people who didn't. Said another way, people who have healthy relationships have a 50% reduction in premature death from all causes.